Maybe just like indiscriminate, just weasel noises, like. But you probably have to say what those were. It would make no sense.
It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's Superhero Slate. It's a modern podcast where we talk about everything that's great, like movies, TV, superheroes. It's Superhero Slate. Oh yeah.
Hello everyone and welcome to Superhero Slate, the show where we run down the latest superhero entertainment news.
We love TV, movies, and superheroes, so let's talk it all out.
My name is Chris Dillard.
And my name is Mike Royer.
And welcome to the official Super Villain Slate review of Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I was gonna say we love TV, movies, and super villains is probably the way to talk it all out. But I mean, no spoilers here. But is anybody really a super villain really in any of the Suicide Squad movies so far? They're usually because they're bad enough to get caught, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the real super villains historically in the comic books either like die. Kind of miraculously, or they just escape or never get caught or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, I think, when I think of super villain, I also think of, like, metahumans, right? And, like, I only feel like we only had, like, maybe one, possibly two metahumans.
Hey, I don't know anything about Javelin. He could technically be a metahuman. There's something special about him. There's some reason he was there,
I'm pretty sure he was just like a Olympian track and field kind of guy. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of what happens with like these kind of gold, silver age comics, right? They're just like, what can we pluck? Well, I was just watching like the 1964 Olympics and they were doing javelins. I'm going to put that person in a comic.
Yeah, imagine how good you'd have to be to just use a javelin on the regular.
Yeah, but before we get too far, right here, up here at the top, it's going to be spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we dive into the spoilers for James Gunn's The Suicide Squad.
Yeah. So we did the Suicide Squad, the 2021 version, released on HBO Max in theaters this week. So you kind of get your pick there. We've known it was coming to streaming for quite a while, so again, no surprise there. And it's on the ad-free version. HBO Max has since launched an ad-supported version in the middle of the year, but it is not on there. So you got to shell just like, what is it, like $15 maybe for the month?
Who knows anymore?
Yeah, it's a pretty good price. It's one of my go-tos. So Suicide Squad's out. People watch it. We've watched it. I don't know how to preface this movie, Mike. I mean, this is essentially a sequel of the original one. I think it's safe to say that, like, you don't have to watch the first one to get this one, but it is a sequel of the first one.
Yeah, and it is hard to talk about this movie without talking about the other one that was relatively recent in history, right? I feel like the first film actually had a really lot of positive marketing. We won't talk about necessarily the quality of the movie, but I remember the promotional graphics, the covers, the controversy around Joker having damaged on his forehead, right? So there was a lot of like pop culture, and there was just a lot of attention on that first Suicide Squad movie. Then, of course, after the movie came out and it went by, I feel like, everybody, this is general public, right? I'm not talking about people that really dig into this stuff like we do, but I felt like the global consciousness of the Suicide Squad kind of dropped off pretty quickly after it came out.
Well, I think it was one of those things. We got our first live action Harley Quinn, right, to kind of grace the. I think she was like in a TV show, but like this is like the first movie version, right? And enough to spawn her on into her own movie with the Birds of Prey, and then again, the most controversial Joker ever to grace the screen throughout there. And so much so, like, even right now in the zeitgeist, 5 years later, 4.5 years later, there still calls for the Ayer cut, right? Like, how have we not... I can't go a week without hearing about this now.
I feel like I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I don't know if we ever had an official news bullet point within the last couple of weeks about the Ayer cut. But he had made a statement on Twitter saying that he just, without a doubt, the studio messed with his cut. He didn't have any of those kind of like jam tracks in there. He said he had a lot of emotional arcs for his characters, and it was all cut by the studio. And I 100% believe him. But then right after that movie, he did Bright for Netflix, which is a studio that's notorious for giving creators a lot of reign over the content that they produce. And Bright was a disaster. So I'm not saying David Ayer can't make a good film, but like if you just like judge the movie that came out right after the one he was like so mad at making, I just can't trust that even his cut would have been good. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, there's also even an extended cut, right? What they called the director's cut, but it wasn't his cut of the film either. They just added extra Joker scenes that they left on the cutting room floor. But that's also not to say the Suicide Squad, the 2021 version, isn't without its own drama. The only reason James Gunn's here is because he was fired from Disney for all of 2 months?
Yes,
3
a
months?
brief hiatus. People dug up some kind of not like a cringe humor, like dark humor.
Yeah.
What was the term that people were using? Shock humor. I
Yeah,
think.
it was shock humor stuff. I mean, he is known for, again, working on with the Troma Studios, who was known for that kind of stupid stuff, right? Like the shocky video stuff. That's it's like you're just gonna roll your eyes and that, this was an era of I believe. I mean, it's like the political correctness kind of thing, and then Disney knee-jerk reaction, fired him, hired him back, kind of thing.
Yeah,
but not before he could go to DC.
And it's kind of weird. It's not necessarily saying that the information within the joke isn't necessarily bad. Like if you make a pedophilic joke, like he's not supportive of pedophiles or anything like that. It's not like he made any statements saying like these are things that I believe. They were just jokes that aged very, very badly. But yeah, that's what brings him to Warner Brothers in the first place. And it's just interesting to see, this is how we get here. And it's also important to note that like he had the choice when Warner Brothers kind of picked him up on the curb when he was kind of suspended from Marvel school, basically for acting out.
Years before Marvel, by the way. It wasn't like while he was employed by Marvel. It was old stuff, but yeah.
And when Warner Brothers picked him up from the curb outside of school, they're like, you know what? You can do whatever you want. You're the best athlete in school. You can play whatever sport you want. And he was just like, I want to do Suicide Squad. So this was his choice. It wasn't necessarily the studio's decision to try to rehab the Suicide Squad in any way. So it's kind of interesting that, even though like the I guess quote unquote franchise, the Suicide Squad may have had some stank on it, even James Gunn was just like, no, I really like this idea. I really like these characters. Let's do it. So yeah. I think that actually led to a little bit of hype for this film, at least for people that kind of keep track of directors. I still believe that only a very small amount of the movie-going population even knows what a director is for the movie when they go into it. They just kind of maybe they know their franchise a little bit, and I'm not even saying that's a bad thing, right? You do not have to keep track of directors and have this information in the back of your head because it's probably not practically useful in your life. But I feel like James Gunn is kind of starting to reach that level, right, of just like, oh, I know that name. That sounds familiar. When I see a James Gunn film, no matter what it is, I think I'll go see it, kind of a la Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, and even in the advertising for a DC film, they were like, oh, from the director who brought you Guardians of the Galaxy. Like,
yeah, they're like, no, we're not even shying away from the hits that he made.
Yeah, we're going to use this. You're going to use this to our advantage. So, this movie has gotten here... it was been a long journey between the original movie, this movie, and everybody involved. So I guess that was a good preface for jumping into this. We have not talked about this movie. We both watched it Thursday evening, right? We're recording several days later. So we've talked about it. I didn't even know if Mike had watched it until literally.
Well, I went into the woods, Chris. I went camping this weekend. So praise the Lord, Starro, the space starfish, for dropping this movie because I didn't know it was going to be coming out Thursday, HBO Max. If the normal movie going experience was out there in the world, I probably would have gone and seen this on a Thursday night. But yeah, you told me like that day that it was going to be dropping on Thursday, and I was like, oh, this is great because I'm going to be gone on Friday. I'm going to have to cram this in on Sunday. So bam, I got in there.
In classic Mike fashion, he doesn't listen to our regular show where we announced several weeks ago.
Well, things get muddy. No matter what, things always get muddy the day of release when it comes to like digital, right? Well, even when Loki was going to premiere on Wednesday, we weren't 100% sure until like that day, like when on Wednesday it was. Was it going to be at midnight? Were they changing? Because this was the first thing coming out on Wednesday. So the day of date digital gets a little confusing, Chris.
Well, the only reason I'm saying say this is James Gunn said it was coming out on Thursday.
Have you seen his
because of his birthday.
Instagram stories? He makes like 100 Instagram stories in a day. I can't tap through all of those. Well, it's too much.
It was in our show news. That's the only reason I'm going to tell you. But that's fine.
Okay, well, listen better than me, folks, and then you won't be you'll be able to plan your week better.
Anytime we mention a date, write it in your calendar. That's all I'm going to tell you. Just do it right then and there. So let's go ahead and Mike, let's jump into this. It's really hard to talk about it without spoilers, I think, in some of this, because again the promotions have said like really nobody's safe, and we'll kind of go with that. But let's go ahead and Mike, if you want to kick this off, let's hear your thoughts on the Suicide Squad.
Yeah, spoiler freeze here at the very, very top. This will be an interesting kind of review and spoiler cast, because what do you do when you talk about a movie that's pretty good, right? I feel like James Gunn did a really, really good job with these characters, with the story, with the biggest surprise just being like the filmmaking, right? He does some interesting tricks with like the camera. He does some interesting tricks with like captions and text on screen. You know, he really gets creative with it. It's almost like, okay, I've made a couple big blockbuster superhero movies now. Now I feel a lot more comfortable making these kind of more quirky, creative decisions, which just overall just adds to the story. I really loved John Cena, so I'm really happy to see Peacemaker continue on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in his HBO Max series once we get into spoilers. Surprisingly, this movie makes you care a little bit more about Rick Flag, which is not something I expected. And at the very beginning, you know, we are presented with a cast of a lot of characters, and this isn't spoilers. He told you not to be precious when he dropped the cast list, but you know, I was surprised some characters made it on and some characters didn't, because you know, you would think like, oh, this person isn't necessary anymore, but they make you care about a lot of misfits, and they don't kind of shoehorn them into being heroes either. They're still just kind of selfish, you know, caring for themselves, but you know, even like a bad guy does have a little bit of humanity at the end of the day. So I don't know if maybe that's what you take away from that, but you know, Margot Robbie does a great Harley Quinn again. She's just really good with this character. Whether or not you like or hate the films that she's in, she's always just doing a very good Harley Quinn. So yeah, I had a great time with this movie. The runtime is about 2 hours long. And if I have any problems with the film, they would just be nitpicks. And I guess if I had to say a spoiler-free nitpick, I felt like the movie maybe dragged just slightly, which is strange because 2 hours isn't necessarily long, and I don't really have my full thoughts on that matter, and it's really not that big of a deal. It's just a nitpick, but I was sitting on my couch, and I was just like, this should be wrapping up soon, right? So that's about it. If I had to pick something out spoiler free, that was a bit of a negative, but I had a great time. No complaints. Looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Looking forward to what else James Gunn is going to be doing moving forward. Sometimes I'm not sure entirely if James Gunn is just directing or if he's writing, but he definitely wrote this one, and you can feel it, and just a fun time overall. I don't have much else to say on the matter spoiler free. So what do you think, Chris?
It's okay. I think the Suicide Squad is just an okay movie at the end of the day. I think when you say you have nothing to pick, I think I will say this as spoiler free thought is turn off the fucking radio. There's too much music in this that takes me out of the film, because I'm like, you're just putting songs in to put songs in because people liked it in your Guardians movie. And I think when they gave him free reign of this, he's starting to show his cracks a little bit of like, yeah, you've been given free reign, you've kind of overstepped a little bit. I do think it is I'm not saying I hate it, I did not like it, but at the same time, like, I'm sitting here trying to remember anything from this movie and nothing has stuck with me, and I think that's probably what we do always talk about, like, you know, what's a fallacy of a film, like where does it really fall apart, is if you don't remember it, if you can't think of it. I think I remember the music being obnoxious, and I remember not really laughing as much as I thought I would. It wasn't nearly as funny as it was, and probably has less heart than the Guardians films. But it is a Suicide Squad. These aren't, you know, good people doing good things. They are supposed to be, you know, the bad guys doing missions they're not supposed to win. But you know, there's some things we can talk about in spoilers that really rubbed me the wrong way in terms of a movie, but like, I think it's just okay. I think in terms of, when we do Marvel, we talk about in terms of the whole. I think in DC, there are a few I enjoy more. There are probably a lot more I enjoy less. But overall, I think the Suicide Squad is just a middling film with characters just trying to see who might live and who might die by the end, and what kind of bet would I have lost if I bet on certain characters. So.
Well, I feel like even if Chris says meddling, that's praise when it comes to Warner Brothers movies.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say,
matter what side you're on, it looks like they're still doing pretty
well.
well.
Yeah. The last one we got from them was 84, right? Wonder Woman 84.
I believe so. Yeah.
Jesus Christ! Yeah, this is better than that by a long shot. I'd even say I'd based on the last Harley Quinn role, I think. This is better than Birds of Prey to me, at least, in that regards. But I'd probably go back and watch Shazam or the original Wonder Woman. Maybe even Aquaman over this. I don't know yet. I'm sitting here thinking about it, but I'm trying not to compare it to other films. It is a new era for Warner Brothers, if you will, this year. We'll give them a 2021 slate. They got a thumbs up from me, Micah. Before we go into that, I did know. Before we jump into spoilers or anything else, the cinema score for this is an interesting thing. You're familiar with cinema score, right? Where they pull people walk out. It got the same score as the original Suicide Squad, which was like a B+. I'm like, I don't think I would hold this above that first one by a long shot. So I think that's interesting that the cinema score, while it doesn't indicate how good of a movie it is, a normal audience score is interesting. So.
Yeah, so I guess this would be a good opportunity to jump into spoilers, everybody.
Yes,
put
Easter
up the
eggs,
red
stuff.
flashing light emoji that everybody uses in their tweets when they talk about something spoilery.
Yes.
We'll jump right into
Go watch it and come back if you haven't. I mean, this is a good spot to go watch it and come back, but we'll just jump right in.
Yes, exactly. I have to say the opening of the film was a little interesting to me because we start off here with Michael Rooker, and Viola Davis kind of comes back in and she's whipping up the Suicide Squad all over again, getting a crew together to go storm the beaches, and we have some familiar faces from the last movie and some new faces, and I was primed by the marketing that a lot of people were gonna die. So I was like, I've seen some of the latest movie posters. There's a lot of familiar faces. I know a lot of these people aren't going to be there. So when nearly all of them died on the beach, and then it instantly goes to another beach, I thought that was pretty surprising. I wasn't surprised that like Michael Rooker was going to die and all these people were just going to get mowed down on the beach, but I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, okay, that is a kind of a total like a Amanda Waller type of move to send two teams on the same mission and not tell each other because she just assumes like one of them going to die.
Fail,
so I was like, this works for me. And then we that's an interesting way to get introduced to the main cast, right? After there's been a bunch of bloodshed, we actually meet our real quote unquote heroes, but then we have one of many kind of I guess time jumps or flashbacks where we flash back to them getting brought together.
Well, I think the intro it is fun. I agree with you, and we only had one character kind of introduced on an airplane by Rick Flag, thankfully, this time around. I still don't know what some of those characters do or what their abilities are. I'm like, who is Mongal? What does she do? And
I wonder if maybe that was a bit of like purposeful. Why spend the time to let you know what Mongol does when she's just gonna die? Yeah,
and Blackguard, of course. I think a lot of people will be happy that Pete Davidson kind of gets shot in the face right away. He's the one who turned him in. It's interesting. I do think it's funny that the first person we see quote unquote die in this is Weasel, and he is actually the last thing in the movie, the end credit scene.
I was really happy to see that he didn't die because the character is just so weird. I haven't quite seen something like this on film before. I'm not saying it's super radical or anything like that, but I haven't really seen it before, and it's so weird, and I love the idea. Now, I don't necessarily think the character will return for a sequel, but it's more of like the idea of this lore of like now this weasel just like is terrorizing and eating children on this island moving forward is just really kind of sadistic and funny to me.
I agree with that. I think that was like, I was like, oh, that's entertaining. One of the other entertaining things here, in a dark way, is when the B team, if you will, right, the actual Suicide Squad that we saw, goes to rescue Rick Flag and kill all the freedom fighters.
Oh my
accident.
god! I think that's interesting because that's one of like the best bits in the film. And maybe this kind of goes into what you're feeling where you felt like you didn't laugh much in the movie. Because I felt like there's lots of very humorous scenarios that I think are very creative and they're fun to watch, but don't necessarily invoke like laughter, right? Because when you see them like reveal that like, oh, they just kind of stealthily and very like tactfully like killed all of these people, and they reveal like, oh, these were just innocent freedom fighters, you're just like, that's so dark. I get it, but it doesn't like necessarily reproduce like a laughter, right?
Well it's interesting because that goes to show, even though they are, quote, like you said, we're gonna use quote a lot, heroes of this movie, they didn't do this in a heroic way to get there. They definitely did it. They were showing off. I think even was it John Cena says, you know, like he's like, you're showing off. He's like, well, I'm only showing off because it's cool, and then the guy blows up the delayed kind of gun thing.
And then Idris Elba is just like, damn it, he's right.
He's right, yeah.
Which you don't get a whole lot of moments like that where Bloodsport kind of
lets his guard down.
He like kind of shows his guard.
Yeah, and I'm trying to just go through it. I think that one of the other scenes that really bothered me is the president's immediate reaction to want to marry Harley Quinn the day he meets her. It's kind of weird because that's also predicated on the lore of Harley Quinn, which is messy at best in this universe, right? Because he was saying, oh, my people like love you, they look up to you, like your anti-American sentiments. And I was just like, we really haven't seen that in the films. And even if you can, like, I don't think she gets a lot of TV airtime, right? Just because like she's like a villain or a supervillain. It's not like she's going on like talk shows. So yeah, they probably could have manufactured a bit of a stronger connection. Or at least she'll show like, oh, people have her picture around, like, kind of thing, like, oh, like, like they didn't have any of that. I think it was just one of those. To me, it was a scene set to say like, oh, Harley knows that she needs someone who's not evil, and like she's not with the Joker, and this is a whole metaphor for that.
Also, at the end of the day, since that kind of king, emperor, whatever you're going to call him, since he just ultimately gets killed pretty quickly, and then he's just replaced with another general, could he almost be edited out of the movie, right? Because even if he's like dead, Harley still gets captured, and you still kind of get her action sequence where she escapes the prison. I think like a clever editor could not even require extra scenes and just remove it entirely. So that probably goes to show that, oh, your scene's probably not that your little storytelling segment's probably not that strong if you could just clip it out of the movie.
And I get it. You want to show Harley doesn't need a man to be an individual, right, who can handle herself. Totally understand it. However, you know, when you're like, oh, is this movie over? Like, that's a scene that could probably be taken out to tighten it up a little bit. Overall.
Also, I don't know if maybe the screenwriting of this was in conjunction with Birds of Prey in some way, but Birds of Prey totally covers that entire storyline from head to toe. Like, James Gunn didn't really have to address it at all, right? Because one thing I do like how this is very softly connected to the previous Suicide Squad, and then like very quickly murdered, right? You know, the only reason we even know it's connected is because Harley just kind of has a general rapport with Boomerang and Rick Flag that's not really explained. That's because it was in the previous movie, and that is like the only thing that's really connected to the previous one. And you could almost even assume that Viola Davis is just like, quote unquote, recasted as Amanda Waller. She doesn't even have to be the same character, because all of her supporting staff in those offices, you know, I don't believe they were recast. I don't think they were in the first one. I don't think so either, because it was basically just her that had any performance there. I don't remember.
I kind of want to go through the characters. The main cast characters include Bloodsport, who has his mask kind of reminds me of like how everyone has a mask. You just push a button and it kind of folds up these days. Like what was it? Snake Eyes has one. He had a movie a couple weeks ago, and you know, Star-Lord has a push-button mask. Like, yeah, he's got a push-button mask. That's all right. But his gun packs were pretty cool. I wish he would use more guns throughout. Moving along, John Cena's Peacemaker. Yeah, definitely a douchebag in this. That was a weird turn for the character. I didn't see him, again, we're in spoilers, kill Rick Flag in the middle of all this kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't think that they would turn against each other. I mean, I would expect them to turn against each other, but I didn't think the finality of straight up killing a character would happen.
Yeah, especially like one of three characters left over from the first movie, right? In terms of like the squad. Boomerang went out very quickly with that exploding helicopter.
He went out with a smile too, like he knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, and then Rick Flag being stabbed by Peacemaker. I was like, damn, like this. Like, and then it did like the unnecessary scene where it showed his interior of his heart being pierced with the ceramic tile. We're like, you can stab him in the chest, and I think we'll get it.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm curious if that was always the plan or not, because I do kind of see, though, maybe there was a creative choice where it's like people get stabbed in the chest all of the time and they come back to life. Maybe we need to actually show it going into the heart and show like, oh yeah, Rick Flag is definitely dead. He's not coming back.
Yeah. So, and then I thought he was killed, which would have been nice. But he's coming back to life, and I think that confirms his show is now after the movie.
Yeah, that was an interesting problem I was solving during the whole time I was watching the movie. I was just like, oh, is Peacemaker dead or not? And then he gets like shot in the neck, and there's lots of blood. I was like, that looks like that might be hard to come back from. I guess they might be able to, but it looks like his show's a prequel, and then we kind of have the not really post credits, but kind of post credits of Peacemaker.
The mid credits scene is them, and then Ratcatcher 2. I enjoyed her. Daniela Melchior, I believe is her name. Mm-hmm. I don't understand her sleepiness. Like I thought they were going to play off, oh, you're so sleepy, but it was just because, oh, you're a millennial. I thought that was a waste. But her dad was Taika Waititi, the original Ratcatcher.
Did you catch that in the flashback? Because I didn't notice it until they actually showed his character in full at the end.
I did, and then in her cell, there's a picture of him.
I didn't catch it, so it was almost a little bit of a reveal for me. I was like, oh shit, that's
yeah. Well, I thought that was. I didn't think they'd actually have scenes with him, right? I thought they were just going to use him in like, oh, here's a little bit, but like, oh, this is really, really funny to use him for that. So that was a fun little throwaway.
Yeah. We were big fans of Ratcatcher in this house because, as some listeners may know, we have had pet rats for, I think, like 6 or 7 years in total. We had quite a few of them. So they did really good with the rats, pretty good animations. I was like, this feels like when we had pet rats. And we were so pleased that the main rat was Sebastian, I think. Yeah, we were very happy to see that in a rated R movie that he didn't just like get squished to a pulp. And there was actually no like mutilation of rats necessarily. Right. So I was like, okay, this is good. Because we think rats are cute and we like them in this house.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I expected, something to happen in her, kind of like a baby Groot scenario, to be honest. But that was good. And then also, they're the ones who technically saved the day at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, that I don't know if this is necessarily like a problem, good or bad, but kind of like when you're watching like a Captain Marvel film, especially when she pops up in Endgame, you're like, she's way overpowered, right? She seems like she could just solve all the problems in this movie all by herself. I kind of almost felt that way about Ratcatcher, right? I was just like, this island is swarming with rats, which I think is relatively believable because I think a lot of tropical islands are literally swarming with rats. Like she could have I feel like she could have just like sent the rats to swarm this lab facility as soon as they landed on the island, and like they could have just solved the problem. She was almost like too powerful, but like I almost like knew she was going to save the day at the end because like, oh, there's a swarm of starfish. Do we have an opposing swarm that we could call on?
Well, I think there was one particularly there's like, oh, this place is covered in security cameras. She's like, oh, I'm taking care of it, and they had him show out one camera. The rest were open. I'm like, why didn't you just have them do the rest of it?
I guess we are to assume that they go to the other cameras.
They didn't, because remember when they're looking at the cameras later in that room, all of them are still on, and then that security girl's like, oh, the people have gotten in, they're going through this. Like they literally only chewed through one camera.
Oh, and I guess that also kind of goes to the overpoweredness of her character too, right? Because she also is not very active in this movie until like the very end, right? Like you say that kind of like that sleepiness quality, right? I think she throws a rat like once at like a kind of like a military person, and then like turns the corner, runs down an alley.
Yeah, like it like went in his mouth or something weird.
Yeah. It's just like I think her powers are legit cool. Like there's kind of a similar kind of rat strategy in that in that older movie Wanted, with Angelina Jolie, and they're bending the bullets because.
What about, is it Willard also as well?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's that guy who controls rats. Yeah, it was a movie, but yeah, go on. Sorry.
Okay. A swarm of anything is very, very powerful. So I guess that's the thing. Like, you got a very goofy power. I felt almost the same thing about Polka Dot Man too, right?
Yeah.
Like, your two kind of lowest tier like heroes on the totem pole here are the strongest, and I felt like if they just kind of like just sat down and like just had a conversation real quick, like at least they did kind of nerf Polka Dot Man a little bit because he was actually crazy, which led to some interesting visuals.
Right, exactly. He was literally hallucinating. Everyone was his mom. It was fun until they were dancing with each other in the club, and I'm like, oh, this is awkward to look at. But I mean, that's a good sign, like when they make you feel awkward watching the movie. But like, I feel like I'm sad he was crushed at the end. Like, I'm like, oh, he's one I really wanted to see live.
Well, he said at the beginning of the movie that he hoped he died. I mean, I know he was having a bit of an arc, and maybe he wouldn't have that same sentiment any longer. But.
And then he yelled he was a superhero right before they squished him. But he did disintegrate what most of Starro's leg with his polka dots. So
yeah, I like the origin of Polka Dot Man too. I don't know exactly if his origin of his powers has adapted over time. I think originally, like, there wasn't a deep backstory to why he could throw polka dots, but I do like this idea of that, like, his mother was a scientist. He had like an interdimensional virus, because that just sounds really cool, right? Interdimensional virus is just very comic booky, so I wouldn't be surprised if, like, oh, maybe that's like the new 52 origin or something for that character. And I thought the effect looked really cool too, and I felt like it was very James Gunn-esque to add the extra bit of just like, oh, if he doesn't get rid of them, he has to puke them up. I thought that was a cool addition, but it's almost kind of like Chekhov's vomit, right? You would expect to see that vomit thing maybe show up again later. Maybe because this reminds me of like another nitpick that I have. So when Rick Flag, Peacemaker, and Bloodsport, right? Bloodsport? Yeah, Bloodsport are captured, or they are voluntarily captured, and they end up in that security van. Usually when you're like writing like a story or an action sequence, your characters have to like kind of creatively get out of that situation, or somebody from the outside has to come help them. So I don't necessarily like that the situation was just like, oh, let's do that one punch death blow type of thing, and you can do it if you know how you're doing. It's just very weird and awkward, and it kind of came up out of nowhere, and they all knew how to do it, and there wasn't really a callback or a reference to it. It was just very strange, and it almost makes me think like, oh, it'd be funny if maybe they took Polka Dot Man with him and he started to like convulse because he had to throw up these dots, and maybe that kind of destroyed the car. 'Cause that's like a creative way to get out of it that you're not exactly expecting. So that was one nitpick of just like, that's kind of I feel like this is kind of a weird execution to get out of this. I guess execution is a double entendre here. It's
true.
But that was one little bit of a nitpick.
Yeah. And lastly, one of the he was a fun character. I don't know if he was useful, but was King Shark, Nanawe. I think he was great. Sylvester Stallone did the voice. I loved him. He was like, if I laughed at anything, it was his like literal takes on everything, right? Like, he was the Drax and the Groot of this
group, that's a good way to put it.
If you mix them together. And other than the little bitty fishies that wanted to bite him and eat him that were released later, did he really contribute a lot to this the movie, you feel?
Well, he contributed a really cool shot where he rips somebody in half, and then a bolt of lightning kind of inexplicably comes right behind him. It was a pretty cool looking shot. So at least he was able to lean into the R rating a little bit.
Yeah.
Because surprisingly, there's not a whole lot of gore, right? I mean, there's a little bit of there, and he rips a guy in half, obviously. How do you say rip somebody in half without being rated R? We got to see Pete Davidson shot in the face, but really this R rating is 100% language, right? That's exactly what it is. James Gunn did not want to be limited on what swear words he was allowed to use.
Yeah. I think the other one was the Thinker, when he was smashed up against the wall after Starro ripped him apart.
Also, the Thinker, if we're going to a character there, a little underutilized, right? Yeah. I totally believe that the Thinker would be up to these types of shenanigans, right? And he has this very intelligent brain that will let him do these things. But we never really got to see the brain in action. we just assume that his brain did all of this stuff over the last 30 years. You would expect him to use his intelligence to kind of get out of being captured, right? Or get out of a situation. He's basically just a normal scientist. We don't really get to see him do anything like super evil specifically.
And he says he controls Starro, but we didn't see him control Starro.
Yeah, we didn't see any of that, did we?
Yeah. So I mean, great character. I love him. He was the doctor for Doctor Who for a while. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I think it's not a bad movie. Don't get us wrong. It's not a bad movie. To me, it was just an okay movie. I'm trying to find a list of all the songs they played because I think, you're familiar with diegetic music, right? Like where the music is in the movie and then you hear it. And then there's some like songs that we're hearing very loudly. Then they're on the radio or they were on the airplane, that kind of thing. And I just feel like I don't think anyone reeled him in on the song choices. And it feels like, when you make a student film and you try to put every song you think of.
It's funny that you mentioned that just because I'm trying to think back and I cannot recall a single song in the movie. I don't know if maybe our brains were just in totally different places when we were watching the movie. And I'm not saying either of us are right or wrong or one should be thinking the other way. But like I can't think of any song that was particularly in this movie. So I don't know what's going on there.
Well, I don't know if I know them by name because I'd never heard them, but like it opened with Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues, right? Like it goes into that, and then there are. I was trying to see if I can find all the songs. Yeah, there's a list of songs. But like I could hear the I was like, this is taking me out of the movie because I could hear the actual music over like an orchestral score or something like that, right? Whereas like I feel. I don't want to compare to Guardians, but when he wrote the Guardians, like he made the music part of the characters, right? Like Star-Lord listened to the music. He had his headphones on. He had his mixtapes, if you will. So, I definitely don't fault him for his love of music. I just feel like it was a little overbearing on some of the scenes, a little bit for that. So, yeah,
I think maybe one of the last big characters that we touch on here is Starro, kind of our main villain here, which I thought they did some pretty clever things with Starro. I like the introduction of the character of, let's just say the character has been here for a really, really long time. We'll just give a little bit of background here on kind of a classic projector in front of a scientist, and they kind of showed the scale of how the character changed. It was just randomly floating in space, which I think is just kind of an eerie concept that I just kind of like the idea of. Some astronauts in space, they look out the window and they see like a freaking starfish with an eye. That's just like so bizarre, and I don't know it. My brain really likes that, so they bring it down to Earth, and then there's this whole kerfuffle between who's responsible for this disaster and everything. The geopolitical plot line that kind of moved the movie along wasn't too intriguing to me. I do like that stuff in general, but it just kind of felt a little tacked on. It was more for the squad themselves to get some leverage over Waller to get out from under her thumb.
I like Starro. I think he was cool. The spores coming out of his little armpits was a little interesting. I wish they kind of used that a little bit more, if you will. Like we didn't see them really fight a lot of Starro people at the end of the day, and I believe they set up anyone infected by Starro was as good as dead, right? Like the second he gets a hold of them, so they didn't really fight him either. But you made me think of Amanda Waller in this movie. I didn't really care for her as much as I did in the first one. I think there's that scene where they're like, oh, the squad go home, don't get involved, when she could have easily used that for her political gain to say, like, my team went in and solved the day. Why would she not do that? Like, that's how she's always been portrayed in the films. I was like, why didn't you do that?
And one thing I was almost expecting, and I would have been in character, and I think it would have actually been kind of like dark and funny, very much up James Gunn alley, of they knock her out so they can take control over, and then at the very end, they just show her kind of rubbing the back of her head and very angrily. Like, the very Amanda Waller thing to do would have been to literally kill one of them, right? Yeah. To kill one of her employees, or at least show them, like, locked up, getting carted away to, like, Guantanamo or something. Because, like, she doesn't like, a pardon language, she doesn't fuck around. So I was kind of expecting a little bit of that. So that was kind of strange to kind of see her, like neutered there at the end, where it's just like I don't think she would do that. Like, that's kind of the main thing about her character that has kind of carried over from the previous movies. You kind of love to hate her,
Right.
right? Because she's such a bitch, right? Because she's really good at her job and she has to do that. And also, it's a good sign that the movie is making you empathize with the criminals, and Amanda Waller kind of becomes the most unlikable person. But yeah, it is kind of a strange turn there at the end that she would kind of just like give up and slink away to her office.
Yeah, and the worst she did was put them in charge of Peacemaker, right? At the end, like, that's their punishment. I'm like, oh, okay. It's just weird. I figured she would try to use it like, okay, team, like, you're not gonna live. You need to go do this kind of thing, like, rather than pull them back. Which is, it was just out of character because she literally killed everyone in the office in the first movie. Remember when the squad got it? Like, she just killed everybody in cold blood. So.
And also the two characters that are put on Peacemaker's assignment, none of them are the ones that knocked Amanda Waller in the back of the head with that pipe or whatever it was. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of strange.
The one guy with the glasses, when they're Steve Agee or whatever, he actually did the motion capture for King Shark as well.
Oh, okay. He's popped up in a lot recently. He must be pretty popular in kind of like maybe some of the comedic kind of circles out here, because he pops up in a lot of movies and TV shows.
Yeah, so I think I think James Gunn would have written him into the Peacemaker show as well then, because he worked with him on two different levels.
Yeah, I have to say, I do really like the visceral end of Starro. Very, very dark, even though they make us connect to the character at the very end, where he wasn't bothering anybody. It's kind of Earth's problem for bringing him down there, and he was just kind of not really enacting revenge, but it's just like, what are you going to do? If you bring this monster to Earth, you can't be surprised that he's going to, like, mess your crap up. Yeah. So the fact of, like, it makes total sense, but I wasn't expecting it. If Harley Quinn and a javelin attacks an eye, it's not going to stick on it like, like a pick in the side of like a cliff, right? It is just a big liquidy center, so she just floats in there, and I was like, oh, this is gross. And then the rats jump inside, and I was like, oh god. And then they do the pull out where you see Starro's like
collapsed
liquid in his eye jostling around. There's blood in it, and it's just like, I've never seen anything quite like this. This is making me cringe in like the best ways. So because you really do think like, how is this squad of people going to take down this big starfish? And it seems like maybe they should have had like a plan or something, because it is kind of unbelievable that they kind of made it to that point,
right?
Because like, Bloodsport, really, really smart guy. He's got some cool gadgets. He can make some pretty big guns, but you're not even putting a dent in the Starro, and he's just like, all right, I guess all I can do is just keep shooting. If he was supposed to be like this really big tactful person, it seems like he should have taken a minute, like, okay, team, get your rats over here, you do this, you do that, and he was just like, I'm just gonna shoot stuff.
Right. Yeah. And then I guess we didn't see his daughter. Apparently, I guess didn't go to jail then, right? Like, they just kind of left that out in the open.
Yeah, and this is also kind of strange. I don't know if this was strategic or James Gunn just didn't care and wanted to do what he wanted to do, but Bloodsport is just so close to being the same character as Deadshot in the other Suicide Squad movie, down to like the family connection and like and looking up to them possibly really being a hero. It just treads a lot of the same plot lines, and I'm curious if that was strategic or if like James Gunn really was just going in and just like, I'm going to do this. I don't know. It just does really feel like that, like maybe Will Smith was supposed to be in this, and then just things like fell out very early, so they just pivoted. So it doesn't really feel like he was ever supposed to be in it, because that was one positive that I do remember a lot of people saying about the first Suicide Squad, was that the Margot Robbie was great, and then also Will Smith brought a lot to that character. So I guess if I had to be a little conspiratorial, it does feel like that maybe it was supposed to be in there.
If it is, that's fine. If not, I think Idris Elba did a way better job overall. I think between him and Will Smith, I'd much rather watch a movie with him in it than Will Smith trying to pretend like this is the best movie in the entire world. I mean, even Idris Elba did a Fast and Furious movie, right? So, he did Ghost Rider too, if you really want to go that low. But anyway, I think the actors I don't have any complaints with the actors. I think that's something I can say here. Like, literally, the cast and the weird characters were spot on throughout the whole thing. Then I forgot I literally forgot that she carried that javelin from the start of the movie through the entire movie.
Almost. She picks up the javelin off the wall when she's escaping.
When she gets captured, yeah.
Yeah, so not quite, but almost.
But yeah, but like when she's available to carry it, she took it with her, kind of thing. And that was definitely interesting. I was trying to think if there's anything else out here. There is a quick blink and you'll miss it cameo from Mantis, Palm Clementif, if you will. She's one of the dancers in the club. She had a couple scenes.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, is that the lady who plays Mantis? Because she doesn't look the same without the Mantis makeup on. So there was that. And I just trying to think. There is in the prison when they're doing like the walkthrough. There is like James Gunn's brother plays Sean plays the Calendar Man. He's also Weasel, but he was the Calendar Man for a scene there.
Yeah, he actually is yelling at Polka Dot Man,
yeah.
like just making fun of, I guess, his polka dots in general.
Yeah. So I think this is better than the first one. I don't know if I'm going to revisit this movie. I think is the other thing, but I mean, I don't hate it. I'm not in love with it. It's not my favorite movie, I guess.
I think one thing that may have helped overall, and I'm not necessarily like, begging for like another like blockbuster globetrotting movie, but the whole movie really was just set on the island. So we didn't really get a lot of visual different locales, right? And I'm not saying a movie has to do that, and that's the only way a movie can be good. But like, maybe if there was a little bit of a scene change, if we felt like there was the adventure moved locations a little bit more, maybe that kind of would have helped like diversify things a little bit. But who knows? That could add length to the movie. And I just said at the beginning, I felt like it felt a little bit long. So who knows? I could just be talking myself in circles. But overall, I had a really, really good time. It felt like a James Gunn movie, and he makes pretty good movies. So like, if this is the trend that Warner Brothers wants to go to, I'm very interested to see what happens. Right? Like, is he gonna do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and just kind of like not retire, but kind of step back from Marvel, right? He did his trilogy, and is he going to continue up on this Suicide Squad movement? And, I don't know. He
did say that, or someone at Warner Brothers says they have more projects with James Gunn in mind. He is doing the TV show, right? Peacemaker. He did write and film most of that, and then he's also doing the Christmas special or holiday special for Guardians.
For Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah.
And then that. So I think literally after Guardians 3, he might have his pick of the litter, if you will. If he wants to do Marvel, he'll probably get to do something random again. But if he wants to go to DC and do this again, I think so. I don't know what a follow up to this movie would be. I think one of the other things is I don't know how this fits into the DCEU at large, right?
How do you even square any of this away?
The only mention they have is that Bloodsport shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet, and that was it. So it could go either way, really. Down that road. So.
I mean, I know Superman gets put in the ICU. They say that, but like, is that just like a Tuesday for Superman? He's always like almost dying and saving the world. So it's kind of like almost like Bloodsport will remember that for the rest of his life. But Superman's just like, I'm busy doing a lot of other things, right?
Well, what was he? Was he getting paid for? Like of all the people, Bloodsport doesn't come across as a villain, right? He's just a mercenary kind of thing. So like, why was he shooting at Superman? Of all the people you could shoot at, Superman.
I guess it would be an interesting story to explore because theoretically they're off the hook from the Suicide Squad. They're scot-free because they have that leverage over Waller. So do they all just kind of stay together and keep doing adventures? That's almost kind of the same story of Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
Yeah.
They all get together,
they expunge their records,
but then they become a family. So I don't know if just James Gunn really likes to tell that type of story. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I guess the built-in advantage of a Suicide Squad franchise is you can like swap characters in and out, right? Because they're just supposed to die. Right. So you can kind of drudge up a lot of weird abstract characters, kill them, and then fill the ranks on the next movie. It does make you wonder where they'll go and what they'll do. Yeah, or even if they don't touch these characters again and they introduce a new squad, if you will. It's definitely doable, right? Like he's like, I got another list of 10 characters I want
want to play with.
I mean, I didn't really want to bring this up because like it's pointless in my opinion to talk about box office during the pandemic because it doesn't make any sense. So you can't even really read into the numbers that this film did, but I feel like it's very positive across the reviews. So it makes sense that they would make another one. I don't see why there would be an executive over there saying, no, we're not going to make a sequel. It would really just be up to James Gunn. And actually, how much would it be up to James Gunn? Things seem to be very amicable and positive for him over at Warner Brothers, but even if Gunn maybe said he didn't want to make a sequel, he could always just be an executive producer on a sequel, and they could just bring in like a protege or something. Because like James Gunn, he's getting older, he's getting more mature, he's getting more seasoned in Hollywood. I'm sure he's got friends and he's got close workplace associates that also want to direct and write that he might tap to do a sequel.
Well, he did Brightburn. He's not opposed to producing.
He was a producer on that.
Doing Brightburn. I didn't care for Brightburn, but I'm pretty sure he's getting a sequel. I mean, he could do other things. He could essentially be like how he started at Troma Studios, create his own studios, and kind of give all the roles to his brother, if you will. But yeah, I think there's opportunity. I don't think box office is a great number, but I would much rather see this over another Wonder Woman movie based on the past year of DC movies, right? Like literally. I hate to say that. I think Wonder Woman has more weight in her name, but that film was just like slap in the face.
Well, I think it's safe to say. I think it's safe to say for us, we were looking forward to the Suicide Squad because of James Gunn, not because of the DCEU at its current place and time,
or even the property. Like, oh, I love the first Suicide Squad. Let's see what another one is. No, it wasn't that either because, I think most people remember that first one because they had that. What was that 21 Pilot song called "Heathens" that came out with that, like. That really sold the movie, but I don't know what else to say. I think it was I don't know. I think we're both same place. Like I said, I don't need to convince you to not like it. Convince me to like it. I'm in the middle. You may be a little more positive than me, but like
effective film. I'm sure audiences had a good time, and in a normal state of the world, I'm sure it would have made a decent amount of change for them. So overall, I think they checked every box they needed to check.
Yeah, and honestly, it could have been much worse, I believe. And so if you
it factually could have been. We've seen another one. We've seen the first one.
Yeah, so if you got $12, $15 and get it on HBO Max, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. I would not recommend kids watch this movie unless so I'm part of the Deadpool, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and unless you're that kind of fan. I would say Deadpool maybe goes a little bit harder.
Yeah,
but still, this ain't quite kid friendly.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
no nudity. Well,
yes, there is. And when they leave the dance club, there are naked men and women.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was like, did I see a penis? I think
there is a penis in this because that's what Harley Quinn shoots him in the tub on her way out.
I mean, you do get to see John Cena in tighty whities, and that dude is like built. That dude is built from head to toe. After the movie was over, I went online to Google what his workout routine was, and unsurprisingly, he's a self-confessed gym rat. And like this dude on leg day, half of his leg day is like calves. He hits his calves like crazy, and I don't even think we got to see him. So he's doing all this calf work, and he's not even showing them off. So I don't even know what these calves look like on John Cena, but he. You can tell he spends a lot of time in the gym. He doesn't even look real. He looks like a He-Man action figure.
Right. You did make me think the Harley Quinn escape sequence where she's she activates like her actual. I would say it's not activates. Why is Harley Quinn formidable? We get to see in one scene why she's a formidable fighter finally because she takes down all those dudes with the guns. Like dude, her like. It looked like a kind of a ballet, spinning with the guns and then shooting people as she like ran out the door, and then like we got to see all the flowers and stuff. I thought that was kind of fun to look at. That's a clip you'd watch on YouTube, I think. But I do give them props for giving Harley Quinn a pretty cool scene on the way out. So I think that's it, Mike. We got our regular news episode to cover, but anything else you want to add to the Suicide Squad?
Go watch it. It's only going to cost you a month-long subscription to HBO Max, and there's a lot of other stuff on there that you can watch right now. If you listen to our normal news episodes every week, last week I recommended this show that's airing right now called The White Lotus, which is very, very funny, a very good show, dark humor as well. There's just a lot of stuff happening over on HBO Max.
You can watch Space Jam: A New Legacy on there, guys.
No, absolutely do not do that.
Well, watch it if you want to feel even better about this one. Watch that first.
Why isn't LeBron James blood sport in this movie, Chris? He could have led the team. He's a leader on the court.
Lola Bunny could be Harley Quinn. I sense a crossover
Chris,
coming.
This show's over.
Yeah, let's end it.
Done.
Okay, all right, Mike. People know what you're doing, what you're up to. Where can they find you at?
Well, they can find me at Mike Royer Design on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and you can read my webcomics at pickledcomics.com. Chris, if people want to catch up with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Valdan87, or Twitter, Valdan, Valdan. If people know more about the show, our normal news episodes we do every week, where can they find everything at?
All you got to do is visit superheroslate.com. That is the HQ for our little podcast here, and that is the best place to find all of our other reviews and to get our awesome upcoming release schedule. So if you're very confused when all these movies are supposed to be coming out, we have a nice, simple text-based list over on superheroslate.com. No pop-ups, no ads, no annoying newsletter module that tries to get you to sign up. It's just a nice list that we honestly use as a tool, so we decided we could give it to everybody else that loves the podcast as well. So that's superheroslate.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you love to listen to fine podcasts. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and the Gram, and you can get merch at superheroslate.com/store. Reach out and let us know what you thought about the Suicide Squad. How does it compare to David Ayers / Warner Brothers Studios version of the Suicide Squad, just Suicide Squad? This is like the Fast and the Furious all over again. I can't keep track of it.
Two Suicide, two Squad. Got it.
I would assume everybody prefers this James Gunn version, but if there's a crazy radical out there that thinks the Ayer cut would just surpass everything, let me know. I want to hear your crazy thoughts. And if you want to be a super fan of the show, all you got to do is share the show with a friend, share the show with a buddy, and make sure you're vaccinated because the Delta variant ain't playing around, and I'd like to go back to the movie theaters sometime soon, and I need you to get vaccinated so we can do that. So that'll make you a super fan, and we'll be here every week, folks.
That's right. We'll see you guys there.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.
I got not really steamed broccoli, but I'm just so tired of pandemic box office.